The mining station orbited a dead moon in the Kepler 442 system, its automated systems humming with mechanical precision. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her face against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the endless dance of asteroids tumbling through space. 3 months into their survey mission, the crew of the Resilience had found nothing but empty rock and cosmic dust. "Captain, we're picking up something unusual," came the voice of Communications Officer Torres through the intercom. "It's not natural." Sarah made her way to the bridge, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal flooring. The crew of 12 humans looked tired, their faces pale from recycled air and artificial lighting. They had volunteered for this deep space mission knowing they might find nothing, but the possibility of first contact kept them going. "What do you have, Torres?" Sarah asked, settling into her command chair. The young officer's fingers danced across his console. It started as background noise, but the computer isolated a pattern. "It's coming from the dark side of the moon below us." On the main screen, waves of electromagnetic data scrolled past in blues and greens. To most people, it would look like random static, but Sarah had spent 15 years in deep space. She knew the difference between cosmic radiation and something else. "Play the audio translation," she ordered. The bridge fell silent as a low, mournful sound filled the air. It wasn't quite a howl, not exactly a song, but something that made every human on the bridge feel a deep ache in their chest. The sound repeated every few minutes, always the same pattern, always carrying the same desperate tone. "How long has this been going on?" Sarah asked. "According to our logs, at least 6 months, maybe longer." The automated systems classified it as background interference until I ran a deeper analysis. Sarah stood and walked to the tactical display. The moon below showed no signs of civilization, no energy signatures, no artificial structures, just barren rock and ancient impact craters. "Could be a distress beacon," suggested Lieutenant Commander Zhang, the ship's science officer. "But the frequency is all wrong for any known technology." "Or it could be a trap," added Security Chief Rodriguez, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. "We don't know what's out here." Sarah studied the data streaming across her screens. Humanity had been exploring space for over 2 centuries, but they were still newcomers to the galaxy. In all their travels, they had found ruins of dead civilizations, abandoned cities on distant worlds, and plenty of evidence that intelligence had once flourished among the stars. But never any survivors. "The pattern suggests intelligence," Torres said, adjusting his headset. "It's too regular to be natural, too complex to be a simple beacon." The sound played again, and this time Sarah closed her eyes to listen more carefully. There was something in those alien tones that spoke to her on a level deeper than language. Pain, loneliness, a desperate call reaching across the void. "Ma'am, I'm also detecting trace amounts of oxygen and methane in the moon's thin atmosphere," Zhang reported. "The composition suggests biological activity." "Impossible," Rodriguez said. "The surface temperature is minus 200 degrees. Nothing could survive down there." "Nothing we know of," Sarah corrected. She had learned long ago that the universe had a way of surprising anyone who claimed to know its limits. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all knew the regulations about first contact situations. Protocol demanded they observe from a distance, gather data, and report back to Earth Command. Any direct intervention required approval from the Colonial Council, a process that could take years. But the sound played again, and Sarah felt something stir in her chest that had nothing to do with regulations. "Torres, can you triangulate the source?" she asked. "Already working on it, Captain. The signal is coming from a crater near the moon's south pole. It's big, maybe 50 kilometers across. Could be a crashed ship," Zhang suggested. "The crater's edges show signs of relatively recent impact. Maybe 100 years old, possibly less." Sarah walked back to the observation deck and stared down at the moon's surface. Somewhere in that frozen wasteland, something was calling out to the darkness, something that had been calling for months, maybe years, with no one to hear. "Captain," Torres called softly, "the signal is getting weaker. Whatever's down there, it's dying." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. In all her years of space exploration, she had seen the remains of countless civilizations that had fallen to war, disease, or natural disaster. She had walked through empty cities where millions had once lived and loved and dreamed, but she had never been close enough to hear their final moments. "How long do we have?" she asked. Torres checked his instruments. "The signal has degraded 12% in the last hour. At this rate, maybe 36 hours before it stops completely. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about the oath she had taken when she accepted command of the Resilience, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life wherever it might be found, and to represent the best of humanity among the stars. Rodriguez, prep a landing shuttle, she said finally. Zhang, I want a full sensor sweep of that crater. Torres, keep monitoring the signal. Captain, Rodriguez said carefully, Earth Command regulations clearly state that any potential first contact situation requires— I know the regulations, Chief, Sarah interrupted, but those regulations were written by people who never had to listen to something dying alone in the dark. She turned to face her crew, seeing her own determination reflected in their eyes. They were explorers, every one of them. They had traveled light years from home because they believed that life was precious wherever it was found. Whatever's down there has been calling for help for months, Sarah continued. Maybe it's dangerous. Maybe it's a trap. But maybe it's just scared and alone and needs someone to answer its call. The alien sound echoed through the bridge again, and this time every person present felt the weight of decision pressing down on them. If we're wrong about this, we could be risking our lives, Rodriguez said. And if we're right, Sarah replied, we could be saving one. The shuttle Aurora descended through the moon's thin atmosphere like a silver needle threading through black fabric. Captain Sarah. Chen gripped the co-pilot seat as Lieutenant Commander Zhang navigated between chunks of orbital debris that glittered like deadly stars in the shuttle's floodlights. Whatever hit this moon hit it hard, Zhang muttered, adjusting their descent trajectory to avoid a piece of twisted metal the size of a small building. This debris field extends for hundreds of kilometers. Through the cockpit window, Sarah could see the crater growing larger below them. The impact site was massive, a perfect circle carved into the moon's surface with walls that rose like the rim of a bowl. But as they drew closer, details became visible that made her breath catch in her throat. Those aren't natural formations, whispered Dr. Elena Vasquez, the mission's xenobiologist. She pressed her face against the side window, her scientific instruments forgotten. Look at the patterns in the crater walls. Sarah followed her gaze and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold vacuum outside. The crater walls were covered in what looked like geometric designs carved deep into the rock. They spiraled down toward the center in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change in the shuttle's moving lights. It's not a crash site, Sarah realized. It's an arena. Rodriguez leaned forward from the passenger compartment, her security training making her scan every shadow. Those markings could be decorative, but they could also be defensive positions. We should proceed with extreme caution. The alien sound grew stronger as they descended, no longer filtered through the ship's communications array. Now it echoed directly through their hull, a deep thrumming that seemed to vibrate in their bones. Sarah watched her crew's faces change as the sound washed over them. Torres closed his eyes and swayed slightly. Zhang's hands trembled on the controls. Even Rodriguez, trained to resist psychological warfare, showed signs of distress. It's affecting our neural patterns, Dr. Vasquez said, checking her readings. The frequency seems calibrated to stimulate emotional responses in mammalian brain structures. Are we in danger? Sarah asked. I don't think so. It's more like it's trying to communicate on a level deeper than language. The shuttle touched down on a flat section of the crater floor with barely a vibration. Zhang was one of the best pilots in the colonial fleet, capable of landing on a coin if necessary. Through the cockpit, they could see the source of the signal. At the center of the crater, surrounded by towering walls of carved stone, lay what could only be described as a colosseum. But this was no human construction. The architecture was organic, flowing, as if the entire structure had been grown rather than built. Curved passages wound through multiple levels, and strange symbols glowed faintly along the walls with a phosphorescent light. And in the center of it all, something moved. Thermal imaging shows a large life form, Zhang reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Body temperature approximately 40 degrees Celsius. It's huge. Sarah activated the shuttle's external cameras and zoomed in on the arena floor. What she saw made her question everything she thought she knew about alien life. The creature was easily the size of an earth elephant, but there, the resemblance ended. Its body was covered in what looked like natural armor plating, dark blue-black scales that gleamed with an oily sheen. 6 powerful limbs ended in claws that could have torn through steel, and its head was elongated, almost reptilian, with eyes that glowed like amber coals in the darkness. But it was the creature's condition that broke Sarah's heart. Deep wounds covered its body, some old and scarred, others fresh and bleeding a substance that glowed pale green in the crater's dim light. One of its rear limbs hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Its breathing was labored, visible even from their distance as clouds of vapor in the thin atmosphere. "It's been tortured," Dr. Vasquez said, her voice filled with horror. "Those wounds aren't from a battle. They're systematic, deliberate." The creature raised its massive head and looked directly at their shuttle. For a moment, Sarah felt as if those alien eyes could see straight through the metal hull and into her soul. Then the creature opened its mouth and released the sound they had been hearing for months. It was a cry of such pure anguish that every human in the shuttle felt tears spring to their eyes. The sound spoke of pain beyond description, of abandonment and despair that stretched across years of solitude. But underneath the suffering, Sarah heard something else. Intelligence. Dignity. A will that refused to break despite everything that had been done to it. "The arena," Torres said suddenly, understanding flooding his voice. "It's a gladiator pit. They made it fight." Around the crater walls, Sarah could now see the evidence Torres had spotted. Raised platforms that could have held thousands of spectators. Viewing boxes carved into the rock at strategic points. Gates that could have admitted other creatures, other opponents, to face the beast below. Who would do this? Rodriguez asked, her soldier's mind already cataloging the strategic elements of the arena's design. "Someone who saw intelligence and decided to use it for entertainment," Sarah replied, her voice hard with anger. Dr. Vasquez was running every scan her equipment could perform. The creature's biology is fascinating. Carbon-based, but with silicon reinforcements in the skeletal structure. The armor plating appears to be natural, but it's been modified, enhanced. Someone has been experimenting on it. "How long has it been here?" Sarah asked. "The scarring patterns suggest years of confinement, maybe decades. The newer wounds are only a few months old, which correlates with when our sensors first detected the distress signal." Sarah stared at the creature in the arena. It had lowered its head again and was lying still, but she could see its sides rising and falling with each labored breath. Somewhere in this empty system, there had been a civilization that captured intelligent beings and forced them to fight for the amusement of crowds. That civilization was gone now, extinct or departed. But they had left their victim behind to die slowly and alone. "Captain," Rodriguez said carefully, "our mission parameters don't include first contact or rescue operations. We should report this to Earth Command and let them decide how to proceed." Sarah looked at her security chief, then at the rest of her crew. She saw the same conflict in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. They were scientists and explorers, trained to observe and document, but they were also human beings, and the creature below was suffering. "Torres, can you boost our communications array to reach Earth from here?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am, but the round-trip delay will be over 6 hours." "And how long does the creature have?" Dr. Vasquez checked her readings again. "Based on the rate of biological degradation, maybe 18 hours. Possibly less." Sarah closed her eyes and made a decision that would either save a life or end her career. "Rodriguez, prep the emergency medical supplies. Vasquez, I want every piece of xenobiological equipment we have. John, keep the shuttle ready for immediate evacuation." "Captain," Rodriguez protested, "we don't know if that thing is sentient. It could be a predator. It could be dangerous." Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the creature again. It had raised its head and was watching their shuttle with what could only be described as hope. "It's been calling for help for months," she said. "Something that calls for help understands that help can come. That makes it sentient enough for me." The airlock of the shuttle Aurora hissed open, releasing a small cloud of vapor that crystallized instantly in the thin atmosphere. Captain Sarah Chen stepped onto the alien ground, her environmental suit systems working overtime to maintain stable life support. Behind her, Dr. Vasquez and Torres emerged carrying medical equipment that might be completely useless on alien biology. "Atmosphere is mostly nitrogen with trace oxygen and methane," Vasquez reported through the comm system. "Pressure is about 12% of Earth normal. The creature must have incredible lung capacity to survive here." Sarah activated her suit's floodlights and began walking toward the arena. The carved walls rose around them like the ribs of some massive fossil, and she could feel the weight of ancient eyes watching from the empty viewing platforms. The geometric patterns carved into the stone seemed to writhe in the moving lights. creating an optical illusion that made her stomach turn. These symbols, Torres said, running his gloved hand along one of the carved walls. They're not random. There's a mathematical progression here. Focus on the mission, Sarah replied, though she too was fascinated by the alien architecture. We're here for the creature. As they approached the arena floor, the injured being lifted its massive head again. Up close, its size was even more overwhelming. Sarah estimated it was at least 4 meters at the shoulder, with a body length of nearly 10 meters. The creature's eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, tracked their movement with obvious intelligence. Careful, Captain. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm from the shuttle. I'm reading elevated stress indicators from the creature. It might view your approach as a threat. Sarah stopped about 20 meters from the being and slowly raised her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. The creature watched her for a long moment, then made a sound entirely different from its distress call. This was softer, more complex, with harmonic overtones that seemed to carry meaning. It's trying to communicate, Vasquez whispered. The vocal patterns suggest a sophisticated language structure. The creature struggled to lift itself into a sitting position, clearly fighting against pain and exhaustion. Several of its wounds opened fresh, leaking that strange phosphorescent blood onto the arena floor. But its eyes never left Sarah's face, and she had the distinct impression it was trying to assess whether these new arrivals were friends or just another form of torment. Dr. Vasquez, can you scan it without getting too close? Sarah asked. Already on it. Vasquez activated her portable medical scanner, a device designed to work on human biology but capable of detecting basic life signs in any carbon-based organism. The creature is definitely dying. Internal bleeding, several broken bones, signs of severe malnutrition. But Captain, there's something else. What? The creature's brain activity is off the charts. Neural complexity comparable to higher Earth mammals, possibly even approaching human levels. And there's something else in its system. Artificial compounds. Chemical traces that don't belong in natural biology. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the thin atmosphere. What kind of chemicals? Combat stimulants, pain suppressors, neural enhancers. Someone has been drugging this creature for years, probably to make it fight more aggressively or to keep it alive during severe injuries. The creature made another sound, and this time Sarah was certain she heard a questioning tone. It was asking something, though she had no idea what. Torres, are you recording everything? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Full spectrum analysis. If this creature has a language, we might be able to start building a translation matrix. Sarah took a step closer, and the creature's eyes followed her movement. She could see intelligence there, but also something that made her heart ache. Wariness. The creature wanted to trust them, but years of abuse had taught it to expect pain from any interaction with intelligent beings. Easy, she said softly, knowing the creature couldn't understand her words but hoping it might understand her tone. We're not here to hurt you. The creature tilted its massive head, and Sarah realized it was studying her just as intently as she was studying it. After a moment, it lowered its head to the ground and extended one of its front claws toward her, stopping just short of her boots. It's making a gesture, Vasquez said in amazement. Deliberate, controlled. That's definitely sentient behavior. Sarah looked at the extended claw, easily large enough to cut her in half even through her environmental suit. But the gesture was clearly meant to be non-threatening. Slowly, carefully, she knelt down and extended her own gloved hand until it almost touched the creature's claw. The moment of contact was electric. Not literally, though Sarah's suit sensors detected a small bioelectric discharge, but emotionally. She found herself looking into those amber eyes and feeling a connection that transcended species. The creature was asking for help, not just for medical aid, but for something more fundamental. It was asking for someone to see it as more than a beast, more than entertainment, more than a thing to be used and discarded. We see you, Sarah whispered. You're not alone anymore. The creature made a sound that was almost like a sigh, then carefully withdrew its claw. It struggled again to maintain its sitting position, and Sarah could see the effort was costing it dearly. Vasquez, what can we do for it medically? She asked. The wounds need cleaning and sealing, but I'm not sure our medical supplies will be compatible with its biology. The broken limb definitely needs setting, but I'd need to understand its bone structure better, and the internal bleeding. Vasquez paused, checking her readings again. Captain, some of these injuries are recent, within the last few weeks. But the arena is abandoned. Who could have? Sarah's blood ran cold as understanding hit her. She activated her comlink to Rodriguez. "Chief, I need a full sensor sweep of the area. Look for any signs of recent activity. Ships, energy signatures, anything?" "Already on it, Captain. I'm not seeing anything on immediate scans, but—" Rodriguez's transmission cut off in a burst of static. "Chief?" Rodriguez respond. Silence. Torres grabbed Sarah's arm. "Captain, look at the creature." Sarah turned back to the injured being and saw that its eyes were no longer focused on them. Instead, it was looking up at the rim of the crater, its entire body tense despite its injuries. It made a low sound, not the distress call they had been hearing, but something else. A warning. "They're back," Vasquez whispered, understanding flooding her voice. "Whoever did this to the creature, they're back." High above them, pinpricks of light appeared along the crater rim. Not stars, but artificial illumination. Ship lights. As Sarah watched in growing horror, the lights began to descend into the crater. The creature struggled to its feet, swaying with pain and exhaustion but clearly preparing to fight. It looked down at the 3 humans standing near it, then back up at the approaching lights. When it looked at Sarah again, she saw something in its eyes that made her heart break all over again. Apology. The creature was sorry that the humans had arrived just in time to share its fate. "Torres, get back to the shuttle," Sarah ordered. "Get us out of here." "Captain, what about the—" "That's an order." But even as Torres began running toward their ship, Sarah knew they might already be too late. The lights above were moving fast, and she could hear the sound of engines echoing off the crater walls. The alien gladiators had returned to collect their beast, and now they had found something even more interesting to play with. The alien ships descended into the crater like metallic vultures, their hull designs sleek and predatory. Sarah counted at least 6 vessels, each one the size of a small frigate, their surfaces covered in the same geometric patterns that decorated the arena walls. Searchlights blazed from their undersides, turning the crater floor into a harsh theater of white light and black shadows. "Rodriguez, come in!" Sarah shouted into her comm unit as she and Dr. Vasquez pressed themselves against the arena wall, but only static answered her calls. The injured creature had managed to stand, though its broken limb dragged uselessly and fresh blood seeped from its wounds. It positioned itself between the humans and the descending ships, its massive head lowered in a defensive posture that spoke of countless forced battles. "It's protecting us," Vasquez whispered in amazement. One of the alien ships touched down on the arena floor with barely a whisper of displaced air. The vessel's design was unlike anything in human databases. Organic curves merged with geometric precision, creating something that looked grown rather than manufactured. A section of the hull simply melted away, revealing an opening large enough for a dozen beings to exit. What emerged made Sarah's blood freeze. The aliens were tall, nearly 3 meters in height, with elongated limbs that moved with disturbing grace. Their skin had a translucent quality that revealed the flow of luminescent fluids beneath, creating patterns that shifted and changed like living art. Most disturbing were their faces, beautiful in an alien way, with large eyes that held an intelligence both advanced and utterly cold. They wore no protective gear in the thin atmosphere, suggesting either technological enhancement or natural adaptation to harsh environments. In their hands, they carried devices that could have been weapons, medical instruments, or both. The lead alien approached the injured creature with casual confidence, as if approaching a favorite pet. It spoke in a language of musical tones and harmonic overtones that was hauntingly beautiful and completely incomprehensible. The creature responded with a sound of pure hatred, a roar that shook dust from the arena walls. Despite its injuries, it lashed out with one massive claw, forcing the alien to step back. The alien leader made what sounded like a chuckle and gestured to its companions. 2 of them raised their devices, and beams of energy struck the creature in the chest. Not killing blows, but something that made the massive being stumble and nearly fall. "Neural disruptors," Vasquez whispered, reading her scanner. "They're causing massive pain without permanent damage." Sarah watched in horror as the aliens began to circle the creature like hunters toying with wounded prey. They were enjoying this. The creature's suffering was entertainment to them, just as it had been for however long this nightmare had been going on. One of the aliens noticed the humans pressed against the wall. It pointed in their direction and spoke to its companions in excited tones. Sarah didn't need a translator to understand the meaning. They had found new toys. "Dr. Vasquez, when I give the signal, run for the shuttle," Sarah said quietly. "Captain, I'm not leaving you. That's an order. The alien that had spotted them began walking in their direction, its device raised and ready. Sarah could see her own reflection in its large, dark eyes, and she wondered if this was how the creature had felt during its first moments of captivity, helpless, alone, doomed. But then the injured creature did something that defied all logic. With a roar that seemed to come from the depths of its soul, the massive being launched itself at the aliens surrounding it. Despite its broken limb and countless wounds, it moved with desperate speed, its claws raking across one alien's torso before the others could react. The aliens scattered, their musical voices rising in what sounded like alarm. Energy beams filled the air, striking the creature again and again, but it refused to fall. Instead, it placed itself squarely between the aliens and the humans, taking every shot meant for Sarah and Vasquez. "Why is it doing this?" Vasquez asked, tears streaming down her face inside her helmet. Sarah understood. The creature had been alone for so long, had suffered for so many years without anyone showing it kindness or recognizing its intelligence. The simple fact that the humans had approached it peacefully, had tried to help, had been enough to earn its loyalty. It was dying to protect the first beings who had ever shown it compassion. "Move," Sarah shouted, grabbing Vasquez and pulling her away from the wall. They ran across the arena floor as energy beams sizzled through the air around them. Behind them, the creature continued its hopeless battle, buying them precious seconds with its life. They had almost reached the arena's edge when Sarah heard the sound that would haunt her dreams forever. The creature's final roar, filled with pain and defiance and something that might have been satisfaction. When she looked back, the massive being was falling, its body riddled with wounds that even its incredible constitution couldn't survive. But in its eyes, as they met Sarah's across the distance, she saw something that made her stop running despite the danger. The creature wasn't looking at her with the despair of the dying. It was looking at her with expectation. It believed she would do something about this. The aliens were advancing on the two humans now, their weapons raised but not firing. They wanted live specimens, Sarah realized, fresh entertainment for their twisted games. That's when the shuttle Aurora screamed over the crater rim. Zhang had somehow evaded or destroyed whatever had been jamming their communications. The shuttle dove into the crater like a falcon, its engines roaring at full power. Energy weapons on the ship's hull began firing, forcing the aliens to scatter for cover. "Captain," Rodriguez's voice came through clear and strong. "Grab onto something." Sarah didn't understand what she meant until she saw the shuttle's cargo bay doors opening and realized what Zhang was planning. The shuttle swept low over the arena floor, and magnetic grapples shot out from the bay. Sarah grabbed Vasquez and dove for the nearest grapple line just as it locked onto a piece of arena debris. The acceleration was brutal, slamming both women against the deck of the cargo bay as the shuttle pulled up and out of the crater at maximum velocity. Sarah tasted blood in her mouth and felt her ribs protest, but they were alive. "Status report," she gasped as the cargo bay door sealed shut. "The aliens didn't pursue," Rodriguez reported from the bridge. "They seem more interested in recovering their creature." Sarah closed her eyes, seeing again the creature's final moments. It had died protecting them, died believing that they would somehow make its sacrifice mean something. "Captain," Torres called from the communication station. "I've been analyzing the recordings from the arena. The creature's vocalizations, the alien language patterns, everything. What did you find?" The creature wasn't just making random sounds. It was trying to tell us something. The pattern of its calls, especially in the final moments. "Captain, I think it was giving us information." Sarah opened her eyes. "What kind of information?" "Coordinates. Star charts, locations." Torres paused, his voice heavy with implication. "I think it was telling us where to find others like it." Through the shuttle's viewports, Sarah could see the alien ships rising from the crater, their searchlights sweeping the arena floor where their prize had fallen. They would harvest what they could from the creature's remains, she realized. Use its genetic material to create new horrors, new entertainments. But the creature's final gift had been the knowledge that it wasn't alone. Somewhere in the galaxy, others of its kind were suffering the same fate. Others were calling for help that never came. Sarah keyed the ship's intercom to address her entire crew. "Set course for Earth," she ordered. "Maximum velocity, ma'am?" Zhang asked. "What about our survey mission?" Sarah looked back at the crater one last time, making a promise to a creature that had died believing in the possibility of rescue. "Our mission just changed." 6 months later, Admiral Marcus Webb stood before the emergency session of the United Earth Colonial Council in Geneva, watching the faces of delegates from every nation and colony as they absorbed what Captain Chen and her crew had discovered. The holographic display showed the arena, the creature, and the final moments of contact with the alien captors. The species calls themselves the Kethvar, Sarah reported from her position at the witness stand. According to our xenolinguistics department, the name translates roughly to those who harvest entertainment. They appear to be a post-scarcity civilization that has turned suffering into their primary form of recreation. Delegate Morrison from the Mars colonies leaned forward. Captain Chen, you're asking us to authorize military action against a species we know nothing about, based on a single encounter. With respect, Delegate Morrison, we know everything we need to know, Sarah replied. They capture sentient beings and force them to fight for amusement. They torture them, drug them, and abandon them to die when they're no longer useful. But we have no proof that this is a widespread practice, argued Delegate Zhao from the Luna settlements. This could have been an isolated incident. Torres stepped forward, activating his tablet to display new data. Actually, Delegate Zhao, we do have proof. In the 6 months since our encounter, we've been monitoring long-range communications arrays for similar distress patterns. We found 47 distinct signals matching the creature's call. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. 47? Admiral Webb asked. 47 that we can detect with our current technology, Torres confirmed. The signals are coming from systems throughout this sector of the galaxy. Based on the frequency analysis, some of these creatures have been calling for help for decades. Dr. Vasquez stood to address the council. I've spent the last 6 months analyzing the biological data we collected. The creature we encountered wasn't just tortured physically. The chemical compounds in its system suggest psychological conditioning, behavioral modification, and neural pathway alteration. The Kethvar don't just capture these beings, they remake them into perfect gladiators. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Secretary General Park. Admiral Webb activated the main holographic display, showing a tactical overview of human space and the surrounding systems. Operation Mercy Wing, a coordinated rescue mission targeting every signal we've identified. We use our fastest ships to reach the creatures before they die, and we bring them to safety. And if the Kethvar object to us taking their property? Delegate Morrison asked. Sarah's jaw tightened. Then we explain to them that sentient beings aren't property. Captain Chen, Secretary General Park said carefully, you're talking about starting an interstellar war over creatures we can't even communicate with properly. We can communicate with them, Torres interjected. I've been working with teams of linguists and xenobiologists for months. The creature's final message contained enough data to start building a translation matrix. We know they're intelligent. We know they're suffering, and we know they've been asking for help. Admiral Webb stepped forward. Secretary General, members of the Council, let me be clear about what we're facing. The Kethvar have demonstrated technology superior to ours in several areas. Their ships, their weapons, their ability to traverse interstellar distances suggests a civilization that's been spacefaring for millennia. But they've also demonstrated something else. He paused, letting his words sink in. They've demonstrated that they see intelligent life as nothing more than entertainment. Today it's creatures we've never seen before. Tomorrow, when they discover human space, what do you think they'll see when they look at us? The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Delegate Morrison raised his hand for attention. Admiral, are you suggesting they pose a direct threat to human colonies? I'm suggesting that a civilization that enslaves and tortures sentient beings for fun isn't going to suddenly develop ethics when they encounter humanity, Webb replied. But more than that, I'm suggesting that we have an opportunity to define who we are as a species. Do we stand by and listen to calls for help while doing nothing? Or do we prove that when Earth's children go to the stars, they bring hope with them? Sarah activated her own display, showing the 47 signal locations overlaid with potential rescue routes. We've developed a plan that could save every creature we've detected. Fast insertion teams using our newest stealth technology. Get in, extract the victims, get out before the Kethvar can respond? And if the creatures don't want to be rescued? Asked Delegate Zhao. If they attack our teams? Dr. Vasquez answered. Based on our analysis of the creature's behavior, they're capable of distinguishing between captors and potential rescuers. The being we encountered could have killed us easily, but instead it protected us. It understood that we were trying to help. The risks are enormous, Secretary General Park said. We could be exposing every human colony to retaliation. The risks of doing nothing are greater, Admiral Webb replied. Because if we don't act now, those 47 signals will become 46, then 45, then 44. And eventually, they'll all go silent. And when they do, we'll have to live with the knowledge that we could have saved them. Sarah looked around the chamber at the faces of the delegates. She saw fear there, which was understandable. They were talking about humanity's first major intervention in galactic affairs, against a species that might be far more powerful than they were. But she also saw something else. The same thing she had seen in her crew's eyes when they first heard the creatures cry for help. 6 months ago, my crew and I encountered something in pain, she said quietly. Something that had been abandoned to die alone in the dark. It couldn't speak our language, but it didn't need to. Pain is universal, suffering is universal, and so is the obligation to help when we can. She activated the recording of the creature's final moments, its roar of defiance echoing through the council chamber. This being died protecting humans it had just met, because we were the first ones in years to show it kindness. It gave its life believing that we would do something about the injustice it had suffered. Are we going to prove it right? Or are we going to let its sacrifice be meaningless? The chamber fell silent except for the echo of the creature's final call. Secretary General Park looked around at the delegates, reading the mood of the room. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of speaking for all humanity. Admiral Webb, you have authorization to proceed with Operation Mercy Wing. May God help us all. Sarah felt a surge of emotion that she carefully kept from her face. Somewhere in the galaxy, 47 creatures were calling for help that had never come. But help was finally on the way. And when it arrived, it would carry the flag of Earth and the promise that no cry for help would ever go unanswered again. Outside the chamber windows, the lights of Earth's cities spread across the night side of the planet like a constellation of hope. Soon that light would reach across the galaxy, bringing rescue to those who had given up hope of ever seeing it. The age of human intervention in galactic affairs was about to begin. The rescue fleet assembled at Luna Station was unlike anything humanity had ever deployed. 47 ships, each equipped with the most advanced stealth technology Earth could produce. Their hulls painted matte black to blend with the void between stars. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberation, watching the other vessels take their positions in perfect formation. Final systems check complete, reported Commander Torres, now serving as the fleet's communications coordinator. All ships are ready for simultaneous jump. Admiral Webb's voice crackled over the fleet-wide communications channel. Captains, you know your missions. Get in fast, extract the victims, and get out before the Kethvar can respond. Remember, we're not just rescuing these creatures. We're sending a message to the galaxy about what humanity stands for. Sarah activated her ship's intercom. All hands, this is the captain. In approximately 30 minutes, we're going to attempt something that's never been done before. We're going to rescue beings we've never met, from captors we barely understand because it's the right thing to do. Each ship in this fleet carries medical teams, xenobiologists, and enough supplies to care for creatures we can't even properly communicate with yet. She paused, looking out at the stars that held so much suffering. 6 months ago, we met a being that had given up hope. It had been tortured for years, abandoned to die, forgotten by the galaxy. But when we showed it kindness, it remembered what hope felt like. It died protecting us because we represented something it thought was extinct. The possibility that someone, somewhere, still cared about justice. On the tactical display, Sarah could see her target system highlighted in blue. Kepler 438b, where long-range sensors had detected a distress signal identical to the one that had started their mission. Today, we're going to prove that being was right to hope. Liberation out. The fleet jumped to hyperspace as one, their drives creating a brilliant flash that was visible from Earth's surface. For the next 6 hours, they would travel faster than light toward systems where creatures had been calling for help for years, maybe decades. When they emerged from hyperspace above Kepler 438b, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The planet below was a twisted mirror of Earth, with vast continents covered in what looked like cities. But as the ship's sensors probed deeper, the true nature of those cities became clear. Captain Dr. Vasquez reported from the science station, I'm reading massive artificial structures across the entire planet. Arenas, amphitheaters, gladiatorial complexes. This isn't just a world where they practice their entertainment. It's a world dedicated to it. How many signals are you detecting? Sarah asked. Hundreds, maybe thousands. The entire planet is covered with creatures in distress. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They had expected to find one creature like the being they had failed to save. Instead, they had found what could only be described as a planet-sized torture facility. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Zhang called from the tactical station. I'm detecting Kethvar ships in orbit. At least 20 vessels, all heavily armed. Any sign they've detected us? Negative. The stealth systems are holding. Sarah activated the communications array and sent a coded message to Admiral Webb. The response came back within minutes, and it wasn't what she had hoped to hear. All ships report similar situations, Torres relayed. Every target system has multiple signals, and every system has significant Kethvar presence. Admiral Webb is requesting updated tactical assessments. Sarah stared at the planet below, watching the lights of 1,000 arenas twinkle like stars. Somewhere down there, creatures were fighting and dying for the entertainment of beings that saw suffering as art. Torres, can you establish communication with any of the signals? Working on it, Captain. The translation matrix has improved significantly since our first encounter. Torres worked at his console for several minutes, then looked up with grim satisfaction. I've got something. There's a signal coming from the largest complex on the northern continent. It's not asking for rescue. What do you mean? The signal is more complex than the others. Based on the linguistic patterns, I think it's asking for forgiveness. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her readings. Forgiveness for what? Torres played the translated message through the bridge speakers. The voice was synthesized, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. Despair, self-hatred. The sound of a being that had been broken so completely it blamed itself for its own suffering. It's apologizing for failing. To die quickly enough, Torres whispered. It thinks its continued existence is somehow wrong. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every creature on the planet below pressing down on her shoulders. The mission had suddenly become more than just a rescue operation. It had become a confrontation with systematic evil on a scale humanity had never imagined. Captain, Zhang interrupted. I'm detecting movement from the Kethvar fleet. 3 ships are breaking orbit and heading for the planet's surface. Can you track their destination? The northern continent. The same complex where we detected the complex signal. Sarah understood immediately. The Kethvar had detected their communication attempts. They were moving to silence the creature that had reached out to the human ships. All stations, battle alert, Sarah ordered. Zhang, plot an intercept course for those 3 ships. Torres, send an emergency message to the fleet. Tell them we're engaging. Captain, Dr. Vasquez said quietly. Our mission was extraction and escape. We weren't supposed to engage in direct combat. Our mission was to save lives, Sarah corrected. And right now there's a life on that planet that needs saving immediately. The Liberation dropped out of stealth mode like a ghost materializing from shadow. Its engines roared to full power as it dove toward the planet, racing to intercept the Kethvar ships before they could reach their target. Behind them, alarms were sounding on Kethvar vessels throughout the system as they detected the human fleet. But Sarah wasn't thinking about the larger battle anymore. She was thinking about a creature somewhere on the planet below. A being so broken by years of torture that it apologized for continuing to exist. Zhang, give me everything this ship has, she ordered. Ma'am, we're outnumbered 3-1, and their technology is superior to ours. Sarah looked at the tactical display, seeing the Kethvar ships growing larger as they closed the distance. They were sleek and deadly, designed by a civilization that had perfected the art of causing pain. Maybe, she said, but they're used to fighting creatures that have been drugged and broken and forced to perform for crowds. They've never fought beings that chose to be here. The first Kethvar ship opened fire, its weapons creating brilliant spears of energy that lit up the planet's atmosphere. The Liberation rolled to avoid the worst of the barrage, its own weapons returning fire with the fury of a species that had finally encountered something worth fighting against. Below them, in arenas across the planet, creatures that had given up hope began to hear something they hadn't heard in years, the sound of someone fighting back. 2 years after Operation Mercy Wing, the rescued beings had transformed a barren moon in the Sol system into something that defied description. The facility they built wasn't quite a city, Wasn't quite a sanctuary, but something entirely new. Curved structures that seemed to grow from the moon's surface housed beings from dozens of species. All of them survivors of Kethvar Arena worlds. Captain Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen, walked through the main concourse of what the residents simply called Haven. Around her, creatures that had once fought to the death for alien entertainment now worked together to build something beautiful. The being she had come to visit was waiting in the central garden, a vast dome filled with plants from 100 different worlds. The creature was enormous, even by the standards of its species. Nearly 5 meters tall with natural armor plating that gleamed like polished obsidian, it could have been the twin of the being that had died protecting Sarah's crew 2 years earlier. But where that creature's eyes had held pain and despair, this one's eyes held something else entirely. Hope. Admiral Chen, the creature said, its voice translated through the universal communication device developed by Torres and his team. I am honored by your visit. Sarah approached slowly, still awed by the creature's presence. This was Kethmore, the being whose distress call they had intercepted during the battle above Kepler 438b. The being who had apologized for continuing to exist. How are the integration programs progressing? Sarah asked. Better than we dared hope, Kethmore replied. 17 species now work together here. We share knowledge, culture, stories of our homeworlds. Many of us had forgotten we had homeworlds. They walked together through the garden, past groups of beings that would have seemed monstrous to human eyes just a few years earlier. Now Sarah saw them for what they truly were. People, different in form, but united in their experience of survival and their determination to build something better. The Kethavar have been quiet, Sarah noted. Our scouts report they've abandoned at least a dozen arena worlds since Mercy Wing. They fear you, Kethmore said simply. Not your weapons, though those proved effective enough. They fear what you represent. What do we represent? Kethmore stopped walking and turned to face her with those massive amber eyes. Choice. The Kethavar built their society on the belief that suffering was inevitable, that the strong would always prey upon the weak. Then humans arrived and chose to intervene. You chose to risk your lives for beings you had never met, simply because they were in pain. They continued walking until they reached the garden's center, where a memorial stood. It was simple, a curved wall of black stone with names carved in dozens of alien languages. The names of beings who had died in the arenas, who had been lost before rescue could arrive. We've identified over 3,000 victims, Kethmore said softly. Beings who called for help that never came, until you. Sarah reached out and touched one of the names, feeling the weight of every life they hadn't been able to save. I keep thinking about that first creature we met. It died believing we would do something about the injustice it suffered. And you did, Kethmore replied. You proved that its faith was justified. A chime sounded through the garden, and both of them looked up to see a human shuttle approaching the landing pad. Sarah smiled as she recognized the pilot's signature maneuvers. That'll be Torres with the latest recruits, she said. They walked to the landing pad together, where Torres was helping a group of newly rescued beings from his shuttle. These were different from any species they had encountered before. Tall, graceful beings with translucent skin that shifted color with their emotions. They moved hesitantly, still expecting pain from any interaction with other intelligent life. 17 new rescues from the Vega system, Torres reported. The Kethavar abandoned the facility when our scouts appeared. Just left these people to die. Kethmore approached the new arrivals slowly, speaking in a low, harmonious tone that the universal translators rendered as words of welcome and safety. The new being's skin shifted from fearful purple to tentative yellow as they realized they were truly free. How many more? Sarah asked quietly. The deep space monitoring arrays have identified 43 new signals in the past month, Torres replied. The Kethavar are retreating deeper into unexplored space, but they're not stopping their practices. They're just being more careful about it. Sarah nodded. She had expected as much. A civilization that had built its entire culture around the suffering of others wouldn't simply disappear overnight. Admiral, Kethmore said, approaching with one of the new arrivals. This is Yelnsha of the Ethereal Gardens. She wishes to express her gratitude. The translucent being stepped forward, her skin now glowing with soft gold patterns. When she spoke, her voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Your people came for us when our own world had forgotten we existed, she said. We had been taken as children, raised in the arenas, never knowing there was any other way to live. Until your ships arrived and showed us that choice was possible. Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her throat that came whenever she met new survivors. Each one represented countless others who hadn't been found in time. "What will you do now?" she asked. "We will learn," Yelenshaw replied. "Learn what it means to live without fear. Learn what it means to build instead of destroy, and perhaps someday, we will join your ships and help you find others who are still calling for help." As the group walked toward Haven's main complex, Sarah noticed something that made her stop. Carved into the side of the landing pad in simple human script were words that she hadn't seen before. They left the alien war beast to rot in blood and silence until the humans heard its cry. "Who wrote this?" she asked. "We all did," Kethmore replied. "It's the first line of the story we tell our children. The story of how Earth's children brought hope to the galaxy." Sarah stared at the inscription, thinking about how far they had all come. 2 years ago, she had been a simple survey captain following routine protocols. Now she was the leader of humanity's first interstellar rescue organization, commanding a fleet dedicated to answering calls for help from across the galaxy. "Admiral," Torres said, checking his communication device, "we just received word from Earth. The Colonial Council has approved the construction of 12 new rescue ships. The Australians are contributing their new stealth drive technology, and the Mars shipyards are donating their latest medical systems." And the Kethvar response? "Intelligence suggests they're fragmenting. Some factions want to negotiate, others want to fight, and still others are simply abandoning their arena worlds and disappearing into deep space." Sarah looked around at the beings working together in Haven's gardens, at the ships coming and going with new rescues and supplies, at the monument honoring those who had died before help could arrive. This was what that first creature had died believing in. The possibility that someone, somewhere, would care enough to fight injustice wherever it was found. "Torres, prepare the fleet for departure," she ordered. "We have 43 new signals to investigate." "Yes, ma'am." "Destination?" Sarah looked up at the stars visible through Haven's atmospheric dome, each one potentially hiding another cry for help that needed answering. "Everywhere," she said. "We go everywhere until every call for help has been answered." As the rescue ships began launching from Haven's docks, their engines creating brief stars in the lunar sky, Kethmore and the other survivors gathered to watch. They knew that somewhere in the galaxy, beings were suffering as they once had, but they also knew that help was coming, because Earth's children had learned to listen for cries in the darkness, and they had proven that no one had to die alone anymore. The age of human intervention had become the age of galactic hope, one rescue at a time.